welcome to online worship with First Unitarian Church of Rochester. Our mission, through spiritual connection and community, we listen deeply to others and ourselves, open to wonder and transformation, and serve together with love and humility. I am Reverend Margalie Belizaire, Assistant Minister here at First U, and leading worship with me today are Reverend Shari Halliday-Quan, Shannan Foos, Deborah White, Thommy Snell, Rich Wilder, Tjosvold, Jon Randall, and Mariano Randall. Behind the scenes, our ushers and greeters are making things happen so that we can come together. We have a chat chaplain on hand, so if you're going through a hard time or are worried about someone else, reach out to them to connect with the pastoral care team. Look for chat chaplain Kristen Harderly in the chat. A couple of announcements today. One, our usual, stick around after service to connect with friends, new and old, over a conversation. And stay longer or come back for a congregational meeting at 11:30. One other announcement from Reverend Shari.
Thank you, Reverend Margalie. So today marks the end of our stewardship campaign. We did a 2-week campaign and we have had the best first 2 weeks ever. 2/3 of our families have completed their pledge, which is higher than we ever do, even when the campaign is 2 months. So thank you for everyone who's completed. And if you haven't, up on the screen, we tried to make it really easy for everyone today. So if you send us an email, or there are a couple of other ways you can complete your pledge, but feel free to do that right after the service. Heck, you can even do it right now. We've made 80% of our goal. And like I said, 2/3 of our families have already done this. So thank you. You've still got time. The the campaign ends at midnight tonight, but why not get it done before noon? Thanks all.
Let's take a deep breath together as we settle into this sacred time and space. Please join me in saying our chalice lighting words. May the flame we now kindle inspire us to use our power to heal with love, to help with compassion, to bless with joy, and to seek liberation in the fullness of community.
Many summer days in my youth were spent with Holly, my backyard neighbor. We were creative and trustworthy and always seemed to find ways to entertain ourselves. We'd ride our bikes to the library and come back and climb trees and sit on our favorite branches and read books and ponder the world. One time we even rigged up one of those little paper cup and string telephones between our backyard into each of our windows to try to chat. It didn't really work. Then one day on our way to making lunch, when I opened the kitchen cupboard, I was suddenly struck by all the enticing containers of spices and extracts on our spice shelf. Since we realized we weren't familiar with all of them, we decided that we would taste each one by itself. So we got our spoons and we dipped into each spice and tried it. Fairly early on, we realized this was not going to be quite what we expected, but we were committed and we kept going. When we finally got to the vanilla and peppermint lemon extract, I'm like, yes, I know these flavors and I'm going to enjoy this. Boy, was I wrong. I had no idea how powerful a small teaspoonful of direct extract could be. And then in a final blast of creativity, we mixed everything together in one bowl, stirred it up, and tasted that. Now that afternoon was interesting. It was out of the ordinary. It was memorable, but it wasn't exactly what you'd call enjoyable. And I think this is why we come to church. We're called to search for truth and meaning freely and responsibly. Sometimes we discover things that delight us and lead us in new directions. Sometimes we discover things that just don't fit well and are unpleasant. And that makes us adjust our thinking. And that discovery is one of my favorite parts of being human.
I invite you now to join me in voice, body, and spirit in singing the Passover hymn, Bring Out the Festal Bread. Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. What modern pharaohs live in arrogance crowned? Who shall be sent to challenge folly unbounded? Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. Chains still there are to break, their days are not finished. Metal or saddle made, they're still not diminished. Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. Still does resentment bind each sibling and neighbor. Still do the plagues affect us red as the river. Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. Long be our journeying, yet justice is worth it. Dance, Sister Miriam, and help us to birth it. Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. Oh people, lift your heads and look to the mountains. Bushes of flames will call us, rocks still gush fountains. Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom.
Thank you, Thommy, for bringing us that Passover hymn. Of course, yesterday was the first day of the Jewish celebration of Passover, and today is Palm Sunday in the Christian tradition. These are both stories from our theological and religious ancestors in which people move into uncertainty, immense challenge, where they don't know what will happen next, and yet they do it anyway. The story of Passover is a long one of liberation with many chapters. You probably know the chapters of the plagues, and then later in the desert in which Moses gets the 10 Commandments. But there's a lot that happens, and there's this scene right in the middle of this story in which the fleeing Jewish slaves are trapped between a rageful Egyptian army and a raging Red Sea. Now, in most of the times that we tell this story, the sea parts and they're able to flee safely. But it's never that simple. The Midrash, that is rabbinical teachings, they tell the story of Nachshon. He's the first one to travel into the sea. There's been a promise that liberation will come, that freedom is just around the corner, but the group, as they're heading toward this sea, they don't see it yet. Moses falls down on his knees and begins to pray. What am I to do? God, you've led me to lead all of these people, and now it looks like there's nowhere to go. Nachshon, though, another leader, he says, well, I know freedom is coming. I can't see it yet, but let me try. And he dives into the sea. Seeing Nachshon take that first step into the uncertainty that lies ahead, others start to join him. And God then, seeing what's happening, sees Moses praying on the corner or on the edge and says, Moses, your beloveds are drowning. What are you doing praying? And Moses is just befuddled. I don't know what to do. We haven't practiced this yet. And God says, at this point, and you have to remember, at this point, there have been 10 plagues. So there's actually been quite a lot of practice. Moses raises his staff, and all of these things happen. And so God basically says, dude, raise the staff. And Moses does, and the sea parts. But only after Nachshon takes that first step, only after his beloveds are calling and in need, is Moses able to take the next step and begin to imagine what freedom and liberation might look like.
I invite you now into the spiritual practice of generosity. Each week, members and friends generously contribute to our offering to help sustain the work and witness of our church, as well as an organization with whom we split the collection. This week, we share our plate with Grupo Cultural Latinos en Rochester, a non-for-profit that focuses on sharing the diverse folklore of Latino communities through dance classes, bilingual story time, public performances, and more. Programs are offered to all children, adults, and seniors, transcending barriers of language and culture. Our participants learn to work together and develop personal standards of excellence, a pride of achievement, and a curiosity for the Latin American world. There are many ways to give, including Venmo and Simple Church. Please give as you are able. This coming Wednesday, March 31st, is the International Transgender Day of Visibility. As such, we wanted to share with you the work that our Welcoming Congregation team is doing this year. Here they are.
For over 25 years, member churches have worked hard to make sure that persons in the LGBTQ community are accepted as full members of our faith community. To quote the UUA website, becoming a welcoming congregation means striving for radical inclusion and creating spaces that honor every part of our identities, backgrounds, and experiences.
One of the 5 practices we'll complete each year is incorporating worship services and rituals that uplift relevant themes, including welcome and inclusion. Another practice is observing dates that are important to the LGBTQ+ community. They're particularly important because they bring visibility and affirmation to our LGBTQ+ siblings after generations of invisibility and erasure.
The 4th practice is around educating the congregation around LGBTQ issues. Look forward to another educational event later this church year where we'll be bringing in an outside speaker to help us learn about these issues, and I hope you'll attend that. The 5th practice is about giving of our time and treasure. We'll also be conducting a Share the Plate collection later this church year for a local LGBTQ-friendly organization that needs our help. So please look forward to that and participate and give generously. Thanks.
join us in supporting our community goal of becoming a welcoming congregation in 2021. All you have to do is attend the LGBTQ educational programs and activities we offer this year. We need 10% of the congregation, that's 75 folks, to participate. So let's show our LGBTQ siblings how important they are to us.
Indeed, how important we are to us. Please join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life and love, source of endings and beginnings. We come today wearier than we were a week ago. 2 mass shootings in 2 weeks that made the news. Countless other acts of violence. They sure do sit heavy on the spirit. We come with lament, with grief, with cries knowing that the world is not as it should be or could be. We send prayers of love and comfort to Mary joining us from Colorado, to all those in Boulder and Atlanta, to all those suffering or grappling with violence closer to home. Spirit of life and love, source of endings and beginnings. We commit ourselves to the slow and steady work of bearing witness to the helpers, to those who rush to recreate the world as we imagine it could be, to those who know that all that's not as it should be is not the end of the story. Spirit of life, lift up the Nakshones among us. Lift up those who step into uncertainty, those who do not yet know what is to come, yet press forward anyway. Lift up those with staffs of power and turn their hearts. Lift up those like Miriam who come dancing at the end, those with joy and praise in their heart. Today we lift up tiny prayers of hope and celebration for all who've received vaccines, for all who are savoring that first hug, for any and all who look around today and then surely because of the looking, find some of life's sweetness. May that love and that ease surround all of us. May we be grounded in this earth, emerging from the muck and mud of the spring, and know that we are held here. Let us hold a silence together. May our shared presence hold and heal us. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.
what you risk telling your story. You will bore them. Your voice will break. Your ink spill and stain your coat. No one will understand. Their eyes become fences. You will park yourself forever on the outside. Your differentness, once and for all revealed, dangerous. The names you give to yourself will become epithets. Your happiness will be called bravery, denial. Your sadness will justify their pity. Your fear will magnify their fear. Everything you say will prove something about their God and their economic system. Your feelings that change day by day, kaleidoscopic, will freeze in place, brand you forever, justify anything they decide to do with you. Those with power can afford to tell their story or not. Those without power risk everything to tell their story and must. Someone somewhere will hear your story and decide to fight, to live and refuse compromise. Someone else will tell her own story, risking everything. Laura Hershey, telling. While serving as a chaplain at a hospital in Hartford, Connecticut, a couple of years ago, I encountered a patient who I suspect will remain with me for the rest of my life. Anne seemed approachable enough when I entered the room, and I felt connected to her fairly quickly. She had a ready smile, and there was a calmness about her. We got into a deep conversation rather fast when I asked her how she was dealing with being in the hospital. From reading her chart, I knew that she had been dealing with breast cancer for quite a while, and her current admission was the result of an adverse reaction to medication. She replied to my inquiry about her well-being by saying, "Oh, I'm okay. It is what it is." I don't know what made me follow up with, is it what it is? But I did. She looked at me startled, paused, and went on to tell me her life story, which from her telling was a series of one tragedy after another, the kind of horrors that are written about. She spent the early years in a home where her parents, though previously happy, were going through a contentious divorce. After her father left, taking her two older siblings with him, which left her feeling unloved and rejected, her mother began to drink heavily. The mother eventually remarried a man who was abusive to Anne. As an adult, Anne herself married and was happy for about 7 years, and her spouse became progressively more and more withdrawn. One day, the FBI showed up at her door and dragged her husband away along with all the computers in the home. He was apparently involved in a child pornography ring. The analogy she provided for her life resonated with me. She asked me to imagine a sailboat sailing on pristine waters at sunset, gliding along unmolested by the elements. That's how some people experience life, she noted. She continued by describing a different boat, a tugboat that time, on rough waters, constantly having to navigate through thunderstorms and heavy winds and hurricane type weather. That's my life. My little tugboat just keeps getting tossed around. And the worst part is it's the luck of the draw. It doesn't matter if you're a good person or not. That image that Anne painted, this vivid image has stayed with me. And as we continued to talk, I said, "So what has kept you going, Anne?" She answered, my grandson, Noah. Then she also noted that her faith and religious community have accompanied her throughout the ups and downs of life and have been a great source of comfort and support for her. For some of us, this is the draw of a religious community, that accompaniment by fellow religious travelers who are there for us to support us when things just seem dire. And I've noticed as I've been here at First U, the level of love and support that you have shown towards one another, especially in times of need. Is that why you do religion? For the love and support of a community? Religious communities can certainly do that well. In that case, would any religious community do? That is in part why I do religion, but it doesn't tell the entire story for me. Anne has stayed with me because I recognize myself in her. Yes, that need for the support of a religious community, but I think it was the overall moments of despair that felt familiar to me. Someone once described to me as a rolling stone, you know, as in the Bob Dylan song, like a rolling stone. And that song, Dylan asks, how does it feel? How does it feel to be on your own, no direction home, a complete unknown, like a rolling stone? I know how it feels. The person who referred to me as a rolling stone was right to describe me as such. I was in deep despair at the time, feeling alone, untethered to anything or anyone. I was 19 and newly disowned by my family for rejecting the religion of my childhood, my parents' religion. I was raised Jehovah's Witness. Well, not entirely. I was actually born in the Catholic faith and even baptized in it. Around my 8th birthday, my parents, my father specifically, became convinced that the Jehovah's Witnesses had it right when it came to God and religion. And so that's what we became. My entire life revolved around being a witness. Everyone I associated with in any meaningful way was a witness. We, my immediate family, we put up with family members, with extended family members and other non-witnesses, but they weren't a part of our lives. Fellow witnesses were more important than family. This was something I came to learn firsthand when I could no longer defend those beliefs. Walking away meant foregoing of any relationship with my parents, sibling, friends, and remember, that was my entire life. So, not unlike some of you gathered here with me today, I had a religious community that I left behind, a community where I felt protected, insulated, loved, and supported. That protection, that love and support, however, came at too high a price. I needed to give up my own voice, my essence. Laura Hershey from our reading earlier emphasized the importance of telling our stories. It is as essential to live our stories instead of the ones scripted by someone else. And doing that can come with great risks and significant losses. I know that. And it did in my case. In the Jehovah's Witness tradition, when a baptized member, which I was, leaves the faith, they're disfellowshipped, and existing members are to disassociate from them. So my family, as practitioners of the faith, disowned me. Imagine waking up one day and suddenly, without preparation, to find yourself completely alone in a world, in the world, without friends or family. That's the situation I found myself in. And maybe that's not such a stretch for you to imagine, as some of you might have had to distance yourself by choice or otherwise from loved ones in order to tell and live your truth. As Hershey also noted, by telling, and I've added living, your story, you risk parking yourself forever on the outside. Your differentness, once and for all revealed, dangerous. And everything you say and do will prove something about their God and their economic system. Being parked on the outside of someone's way of being for what is true for them is in contradiction to our third principle of acceptance, our UU principle, that is, of acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. This principle marries the need to be in a religious community with the need to question and wonder about spirituality and still feel welcomed. So the community part alone, at least for me, isn't enough. That second part of being able to question and wonder about spirituality and still feel welcome, that second part is very important. And I've learned that my theology is in process and forever changing as new information come my way. Therefore, my religion has to make room for that. In the religion of my childhood, all there was to be known about theology and spirituality was known and outlined in one source, the Bible. There was no room to improve upon or deviate from. Although that's not entirely true, because the governing body at headquarters, they get to interpret things for the masses. At any rate, I get it. That's for some people certainty when it comes to the religious experience. I get it. That for some practitioners, that is important. That is their way of making meaning and finding solace in life's journey. And that is good and well for them. I'm even envious at times at the level of faith that people can have in the unknown. Still, that is not my experience. And perhaps that's not yours either, because here you are with me as well. Following my departure from the Jehovah's Witnesses, I was quite bitter and hated the idea of religion altogether, and quite displeased with the divine. It was during that time that I began to start, after a little while, I should say, I began to become more open to religion. But I realized, though, the Jehovah's Witness experience had ruined it for me. As I got into other religions, though, I realized that I shouldn't put the blame solely on the shoulders of the Jehovah's Witnesses, because it was made very clear to me at the institutions that I frequented that there was no space for wondering and questioning anything related to God. It was almost blasphemy. And granted, it was possibly some of the faith traditions that I visited. But again, there was no room for exploring. Everything was set in stone. So consequently, I would leave part of myself outside the door before I entered those spaces. I did learn a lot, though, from visiting different churches. It seems that without knowing it, I was practicing our fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. I wanted to observe some of the rituals of those religions and learn about them. In fairness, I was looking for a faith community where I could feel at home, where I could investigate things of a spiritual nature, and still feel like I belonged in that space. However, these excursions would never last very long. For how long can I go on pretending to be accepting of something that didn't make sense to me and knowing that I couldn't freely express those feelings? Eventually, and for quite a long time, I stopped my search for a religious home completely. I figured I would just have to settle for spirituality. Fortunately, and by happenstance, I stumbled onto Unitarian Universalism. A work colleague who herself wasn't even UU told me that I could find my people among the Unitarian Universalists. It took me a while to take her up on checking those UUs out, but when I did not look back. Though I have found my people in Unitarian Universalism, I do wish that there was greater diversity among my people. Because from the outside looking in, it's not quite obvious that the UU setting is inclusive. It is pretty obvious that this setting is a sanctuary for liberals of a certain race, above a certain age, of a certain economic status, and certain political leaning. But because of our representation, people of Black and brown folks, young families, and people struggling economically, and our trans siblings and many other groups may not immediately see that this is a welcoming space for them. Our faith is missing so much because of this lack of representation, and we cannot fully live up to our full potential and values until spaces where we congregate are spaces where inclusivity is nourished and diversity is radically welcomed. Ours is a faith that could literally save the life of many who exist on the fringes of organized religion. I can testify to that, but hesitate to venture here because they don't know that this is also their home. So how do we embody our values in such a way that our light shines unto the world like a beacon for all those seeking shelter from the storm, like Anne, having to constantly navigate through rough waters? How do we embody our values so that they see that light and join us? I believe that is our work as people who love this faith and sees its life-saving potential. And for people who honor justice, equity, and compassion in human relationships. And that is our aspiration, our beloved community. To end, I want to tell you what it was like for me the first time I attended a service at a UU congregation. It so happened that the sermon was about what it meant to be a Unitarian Universalist. The minister talked about some of the things I talked about here and more, like community, religious freedom and acceptance, justice, and so on. As I sat in the back of that room, I felt like Jake in the movie The Blues Brothers. If you've seen that movie, then you will know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I recommend you at least play this part. As I sat in the back of the room, I felt like Jake, where he is standing in the back of the church, and then the light begins to shine on him. Suddenly, he proceeds to flip his way up and then down the aisle. He returns to his baffled brother Elwood, proclaiming that he had seen the light. He had seen the light. I had seen the light.
Please join me now in singing our closing hymn, Come Sing a Song with Me. Come sing a song with me, come sing a song with me, come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me, come dream a dream with me, come dream a dream with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me, come walk in rain with me, come walk in rain with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me, come share a rose with me, come share a rose with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
Please join me in saying our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
May we get to live our lives. May we not be parked on the outside for living and telling our stories. May we make space for others to do the same. May it be so.